You kept my Hot Wheels car all these years. Daniel's deep brown eyes searched Margaret's face, a mix of disbelief and something deeper, something that made her heart race. Margaret hesitated, fingers tracing the tiny metal car. I thought I'd never see you again. She never imagined the scrappy boy from her childhood would reappear like this, wealthy, powerful, and tangled in a dangerous secret that could destroy them both. But just as she dared to believe in second chances, a brick crashed through the window, its message sending a chill down her spine. What had she just gotten herself into? The early morning air in downtown Boston carried the sharp bite of autumn as Margaret Thompson stood in line at Brewhaven, a bustling coffee shop. Her trembling fingers clutched a worn leather wallet, counting out quarters and dimes for the third time. At 28, she bore the weight of single motherhood with quiet resolve, her hazel eyes shadowed by dark circles from sleepless nights spent hunched over her sewing machine. Her small alterations business was growing, but every penny counted. Today, $2.75 bought her a small coffee, enough to fuel another exhausting day. Behind her, the crowd buzzed with impatient chatter, but Margaret barely noticed. She was lost in her own world, worrying about her 6-year-old daughter, Lily, whom she just dropped off at daycare with a patched-up jacket and a brave smile. "Next customer, please." The barista's voice snapped her out her thoughts. Margaret stepped forward, placing her coins on the counter with a faint flush of embarrassment. She hated how long it took to count them, how exposed it made her feel. "Wait." A warm voice interrupted from behind her. She turned to see a man in a tailored charcoal suit, his deep brown eyes meeting hers with an unexpected kindness. He was handsome, mid-30s, with a presence that commanded attention yet felt oddly familiar. "Add a breakfast sandwich to the lady's order," he said, sliding his credit card across the counter. "And I'll take a large Americano." "Oh, no. Please, you don't have to," Margaret began, but he waved her off with a smile that stirred something deep in her memory. "I insist," he said. "Everyone deserves a proper breakfast." As they waited for their orders, he introduced himself. "I'm Daniel Carter," he said, studying her face with an intensity that made her heart skip. "This might sound strange, but you look incredibly familiar." Margaret shifted nervously, clutching her wallet. "I'm Margaret Thompson. And thank you, really, but you didn't have to." "Thompson?" Daniel's eyes widened. "Did you used to live on Maple Street?" "House number 247. The question hit her like a jolt. Memories flooded back. Summer days chasing butterflies, a scrappy boy with scraped knees and a missing tooth, sharing popsicles on her porch. Danny? Little Danny Carter from next door? His face broke into a broad grin. The very same, though I hope I've grown up a bit since then. 23 years had passed since the Carters moved away, leaving 5-year-old Margaret heartbroken. Now, here he was, a polished stranger with echoes of the boy she'd once known. They grabbed their orders and settled at a small table by the window. Over coffee and the sandwich she couldn't have afforded, Margaret found herself opening up about her life. Her failed marriage to Lily's father, who'd vanished 3 years ago, her struggles to build her alterations business, her dream of designing her own clothing line. Daniel listened intently, his coffee forgotten, sharing his own story, building a tech company from scratch, its recent sale, a messy divorce. What he didn't mention was the fortune that sale had netted him or the custody battle still simmering with his ex-wife. As Margaret described Lily's latest crayon masterpiece, Daniel's phone buzzed incessantly. He frowned, silencing it. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Just my ex-wife," he said, his tone guarded. "She's having trouble accepting the divorce." He paused, then added, "Margaret, this might seem forward, but would you have dinner with me tonight? For old time's sake." Before she could answer, the coffee shop door burst open. A striking woman in designer clothes stormed in, her face twisted with fury. "So this is why you're ignoring my calls, Daniel," she spat, her gaze raking over Margaret with contempt. Customers turned to stare as Margaret's cheeks burned. Daniel stood, his expression hardening. "Victoria, this is inappropriate. We're divorced. You can't keep doing this." "Divorced?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "The ink's not even dry, and you're already slumming it with." That's enough. Daniel cut her off, his voice low but firm. Margaret's a childhood friend. Not that it's your business. Leave or I'll call security. Margaret grabbed her things, trembling. I should go, she whispered. Thank you for the coffee. She hurried out, Daniel's voice calling after her, lost in the hum of the crowd. Halfway down the block, rapid footsteps closed in. Margaret, wait. Daniel caught up, breathless. Please don't let Victoria ruin this. Let me explain. She stopped, clutching her wallet, a reminder of her reality, so distant from his. Can we talk somewhere quieter? He asked, nodding toward a small park across the street. Against her better judgment, she agreed. They sat on a bench, autumn leaves swirling around them. Daniel loosened his tie, looking less like a businessman and more like a man unburdened. Victoria and our divorce has been a nightmare. She's desperate because I found out she'd been embezzling from my company for years. Millions hidden in offshore accounts. She tried to pin it on my CFO, but I have proof. That's why we split. Margaret traced the edges of her wallet, processing his words. Her own ex had left her with nothing but debt. Daniel's world was a different kind of chaos. It must be hard, she said softly. The truth is, seeing you this morning brought back everything, he continued. Remember that treehouse your dad built? The secret compartment. A smile tugged at her lips. Where we hid our treasure map. I dug it up after you left. Kept your Hot Wheels car. I was so mad you didn't say goodbye. His face fell. I wanted to. My parents rushed us out. Dad lost his job. We were losing the house. They didn't want anyone to know. I wrote you letters, dozens of them, but Mom never mailed them. She thought it'd be easier. Margaret's eyes stung. I waited by my window for weeks. Daniel moved closer. Margaret, Her phone buzzed, cutting him off. It was the daycare. Lily had a fever. I have to go, she said, panic rising. She's sick. Let me drive you, Daniel insisted. She started to protest, but another urgent text. Lily's temperature was spiking. Change her mind. Okay, thank you. His sleek Mercedes stood out against the weathered streets as they sped to the daycare. Margaret rushed inside, emerging with a flushed, teary-eyed Lily clinging to her. Daniel had cleared the back seat, laying his jacket as a pillow. Beacon Hill, Margaret directed, hesitant. Her shabby apartment was worlds away from his life. At her building, Daniel didn't just drop them off. He helped carry Lily upstairs. Margaret cringed at the peeling wallpaper, the smell of cooking oil from the restaurant below. But Daniel focused on Lily, wetting a washcloth and finding Tylenol with ease. As Margaret settled Lily on the pull-out couch, his phone buzzed again. She glimpsed the screen. Your lawyer can't hide the offshore accounts forever. Victoria. I should go, Daniel said, catching her look. But Margaret, please, don't let this morning be the end. There's something I never told you. A sharp knock interrupted. Through the peephole, Margaret saw Victoria, her face set with grim determination. Don't open it, Daniel whispered, his hand on her shoulder. She's dangerous. She knows I have evidence of her theft. Victoria pounded again. I can hear you, Daniel. Your car's outside. Open the damn door. Margaret stepped into the hall, closing the apartment door behind her. This has nothing to do with me or my daughter, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Leave. Victoria sneered, shoving her phone in Margaret's face. Photos of her and Daniel at a fancy restaurant. He begged me to take him back last week. Daniel emerged, furious. Those are from months ago, Victoria. Stop lying. A new voice cut through the tension. Still causing trouble, Victoria? An elegant older woman with silver hair climbed the stairs. Margaret Carter, Daniel's mother. She fixed Victoria with a steely gaze. Leave, or I'll call the fraud investigators myself. Victoria faltered, then stormed off. Margaret turned to Margaret, softening. Little Margaret Thompson, it's really you. Inside, Margaret entertained Lily with stories, while Margaret pulled Daniel into the cramped kitchen. Why didn't you tell me about Victoria's embezzlement? I didn't want to drag you into this, he said, their shoulders brushing. But seeing you again, Margaret, I had a crush on you even at 5. I left a note in that time capsule. I love Margaret. I'll marry her someday. Seeing you today, that feeling came back. Before she could respond, a brick crashed through the window, a note wrapped around it. Daniel read it, paling. I'll ruin you. Then a red dot danced on the wall, a laser sight. Get down, he shouted, tackling Margaret and Lily as a shot shattered another window. Hours later, police swarmed the apartment. Victoria's car was found at Logan Airport. She fled to the Cayman Islands. Margaret arranged for them to stay in a secure penthouse in Back Bay. There, as Margaret tucked Lily into bed, the girl murmured, Is Mr. Daniel your prince? It's complicated, sweetie, Margaret whispered, but Lily's words lingered. That night, Daniel joined her at the penthouse window. I didn't just stumble into that coffee shop, he admitted, showing her an old article about her vintage designs. I've been going there for 6 months, hoping to see you. Margaret's heart pounded. 6 months? I couldn't stay away, he said, taking her hand. When this is over, I want a real chance with you. 3 months later, Victoria was in custody, her embezzlement exposed. Margaret's boutique, Margaret's Vintage Revivals, thrived on Newberry Street, funded partly by Daniel's quiet investment. But a new twist emerged. A letter arrived from Victoria's lawyer, claiming she'd hidden a final account, one that could bankrupt Daniel's company if exposed. Margaret confronted Daniel in their new brownstone treehouse, built for Lily. Did you know? He sighed, pulling out the Hot Wheels car. I suspected, but I didn't want to lose you again. We'll fight this together. Margaret touched a velvet box in her pocket, revealing the restored car and a note. Share this treehouse forever? She smiled. Together? Daniel grinned, pulling her close as Lily's laughter echoed below. Victoria's shadow lingered, but their bond, forged in childhood and tested by fire, was unbreakable.